Welcome to this presentation on substance abuse and HIV/AIDS. We shall be discussing today about the HIV/AIDS and the substance abuse scenario in the state of Nagaland. I am happy to present Professor Chako Karindale, who is the Executive Director of Nagaland Development Association. We are very happy to have you with us this morning to talk to you about the kind of problem that is existing in the state of Nagaland about HIV/AIDS in relation to substance abuse. Professor Chako, you are representing Development Association of Nagaland, and your association is very much working with HIV/AIDS and substance abuse. Can you tell us in brief history about DAN, that is Development Association of Nagaland, and the kind of activities that you are involved with?
Yeah, I'm happy to share our experience with regard to the prevention of HIV and also related to drug abuse. Initially, the Development Association of Nagaland is the organ of the Diocese of Kohima, the Catholic Church. We are involved with education and healthcare interventions all over Nagaland. Nagaland has got a population of about 19 lakhs. Now, we are focusing basically on three areas. One is education, the other one is healthcare, and the third one is developmental activities as far as Nagaland is concerned. And the area of interventions are related to improved health, improved agricultural interventions. Now, we have been functioning for the last 26 years from 1979. The organization has got 32 members working full time as a part of it. And one of our key areas of intervention is related to the prevention of drug abuse, and also drug abuse is also very closely connected with HIV. So that is the reason why we are concerned about this field and we got involved in it.
Professor Chako, we are informed that drug addiction is a major problem in the whole of Northeast. Can you tell us the extent of this problem in the Northeast?
Yeah, I mean, if you think of the whole country, of the whole of India, drug abuse came into the scene sometime by the early part of 1970s, and that was very often it was noticed only in the big cities like Delhi and Bombay and other places. But we know from our own experience, because I have been working with the schools, I have been principal of the school and worked with children. I know from very early 1970s, the issue of drug abuse, substance abuse had already come to Nagaland. Of course, we know that they have come from children who have been in the cities, but once these children who have been from the northeastern states came to the cities, when they went back, it spread much faster than in other parts of the country. Now, the present scenario is this, that a place like Nagaland, as I said, it is having say 19 lakhs of population. We have a very rough estimate. We don't have very accurate estimate. We have about 35 to 40,000 youth who are abusing drugs, various kinds of drugs, hard drugs and soft drugs. And if you talk about Northeast as such, one of the highest affected state is Nagaland. Then we have Mizoram. Then there is Manipur. These are the three states, at least from where we have figures, and we know that it's a very serious problem in the Northeast. And though sometimes the statistics show that the problem is coming down, but those of us who are in the field really understand that there is really not, I mean, the number of children who are taking to drugs is certainly not coming down. It goes up and then it comes down, then it goes up. I think it is related to various other factors.
Well, Professor Chako, can you tell us about the profile of these drug addicts, the youth and other groups who are very much involved in drug addiction in the state of Nagaland?
Yeah, the population that is influenced by drug abuse, children who are taken to drugs, they are in all fields. You find many of them are students. There are many, after let us say 3 to 4 years of drug abuse, you will find a number of, most of them really dropping out from the schools. We have also a handful of them who are into some kind of a profession. We have doctors, we have engineers who are into drug abuse and they continue somehow functioning. Now, if you talk about intervention, the very early, let us say some kind of established way of intervention on drug abuse started by the mid 80s, let us say 84, 85, 86. At that time it was simply a matter of treating. Few of the parents took them to cities like Bombay or some other places where there was some kind of a treatment facility available. But from the late 90s, from the late 80s, you find that there is a growing concern by the public itself, and we have gone in a very big way to prevent the occurrence of drug abuse. And that happened in two ways. One is making the parents aware of the problem itself. Because initially when the drug problem started, most of them said, "Easy, we don't have a problem here. It is a problem there," because that whole issue of denial was there. So it took nearly more than 5 years for us to make the parents realize that here there is a problem. So making the parents aware that drug abuse is a problem and we need to acknowledge it. Then the next level of intervention was going to the schools, to the youth groups, to other religious organizations to talk about drug abuse, so that they could, in their own forum, like religious forums, they could talk about, youth forums they could talk about, students organizations. So education to prevent drug abuse was the next level of intervention. Then of course we moved into treatment facilities and also rehabilitating the drug users.
You spoke about education and the kind of intervention that Dan is doing it. I am keen to know about the kind of intervention by the government of Nagaland as far as education with regard to HIV/AIDS as well as drug addiction, both in the school system as well as in the university system in Nagaland.
Yeah, in the early stage there was very little cooperation, let us say in the late 80s, as I said, when we began the working. But much later, let us say by the middle of 90s, the government really woke up to the problem, because there was a very big pressure from, especially from the women group, the Madhes, what they call the Naga Madhes Association. They went in a very big way to pressurize, build a pressure group so that the government will really move into to do something. So earlier stage the government took keen interest. There were a lot of discussions and planning. At present the government has included in the school curriculum drug abuse and HIV/AIDS as one of the things that they have to learn. It is part of the what they call moral science and health education program. So it is something very, very, very encouraging.
You told us that you are also getting the support and assistance of social workers. Here I am more concerned about the professional social workers. So in your organization, have you employed professional social workers with the MA or MSW? If so, where do they get their training and how do you recruit them?
Yeah, actually the early stages we didn't have anybody who could be called in professional as such. We could only get people who had some experience, because the most of our collaborators in the very early stage, and even now those who are working in the field of drug abuse and HIV prevention, they are not professionally qualified people with MSW. They are very far too between. Especially in the field of drug abuse, we have people who are people who were into drug use, who are remaining sober, let us say 5 years, 6 years, or even up to 3 years. We would involve them, so that we found actually these people have got a much better understanding of the problem of drug abuse, and also they have a greater credibility, because when they go to a house and say, "See, I have been using drug for last 10 years, now I am remaining sober for the last 3 years," somebody would listen to that much better. So especially in the field of drug abuse, we have found that this is the people who are people who have been using chemicals but who are remaining sober. When you upgrade their skills, you give them training, you give them exposure and upgrade their skills, they perform much better. Now to the question like, do we have professional people with MSW, BSW? We have. But maybe let's say if there are 100 people working, we may have let us say 10 of them. So just let us say 10%. So that is the level of people who are professionally, I mean people with qualified MSW people of that kind.
You spoke about your intervention with the drug addicts. We do hear a lot of stories that once a person is an addict, he is an addict forever. I am interested in knowing whether there is cure for drug addiction, whether there is treatment for drug addiction, whether once a person is into drug addiction, whether there is any hope for him.
Because this is a field whether once an addict, always an addict. It's a very controversial thing. But from our experience and experience of people who have been using drugs like, or not only drugs, also people who have been using alcohol, people who have been using alcohol, they know that a person may not be using alcohol for 15 years, 20 years, but you go back even to take once, twice, you are back into the same. Therefore, that tendency, that craving, even you are biologically conditioned that once you get back to drugs, even after 10 years, 15 years, you would be slipping back into it. But the plus point is this, there are lot of other possibilities are there for these people to remain sober. The AA has been a very good example of that. Like they are aware that they cannot remain, they cannot be using drug and remaining a sober person. Just, to give a very simple example which other people can understand. See, suppose I am a person with, is having a problem with the diabetics. Now, I can remain a very functional person with all the normal care that a person with the diabetics has to take care. But suppose I say, okay, I have been taking care of myself for the last 10 years, 15 years, let me start to get using sugar and other things. The person goes back into the same problem. It is something very similar to that. But we have found that there are people who have used chemicals for 10 years or 15 years, but still they are remaining really sober and doing a very, very useful, very helpful work.
We are told that all the statistics show that there is too many drug addiction and HIV/AIDS cases in the whole of Northeast. One always wonders to what extent this is true. Since you are working in the Northeast and particularly in Nagaland, can you tell us the actual situation?
Yeah, from my own experience and also the experience of my colleagues, our colleagues who are working in the field, this is the kind of assessment that we have. Like for example, Northeast has got, if you take the population percentage, the highest number of drug users, especially in the 3 states which I mentioned earlier. Mizoram, Manipur and Nagaland has got the highest population. The one simple, easy reason to understand is this, that it is very close to the areas where they produce chemicals like heroin, because the Golden Triangle with Burma, Myanmar and all that is very close. So the availability of the drugs. So that is one reason. The other reason, which is very less talked about, is perhaps the social aspect of it. One of the things that we have to keep in mind when we talk about the Northeast is so varied, so different, and most of the population that is affected by drug abuse is the tribal population. Now, if you go back in history, let us say last 100 years, these were people who were living in total isolation with very little contact with the rest of the country and what was happening in the rest of the country. In the last, let us say, about 50 years, these ethnic groups came in contact with the rest of India, and the change has been so fast. And anyone who is familiar with changes in the society will know that any society takes long time to absorb change. If you are forced to, exposed to change in a way that is not able for you to absorb, there will be real social problem. And this is something that the Northeastern society is facing. because they are not able to cope with change. And that segment of the population that is most affected is the youth, because the elderly people, they have lived their lives, they know more or less, they have their own sets of values and all that. The younger generation is exposed to this change. They have neither the kind of firm values of the older generation, and they are coming into touch with the values of the 21st century. So they are caught up. So ultimately they find that drug is one of the coping mechanism. Like use of drugs somehow makes them comfortable to cope with, of the values, the cultures of their parents, and also the values and cultures of what they see, let us say, in the cities like here in Delhi, or some of them who go out. So this is what we call a kind of cultural shock, and these people, the youth, are especially, mainly they are dealing with this cultural shock by going into drugs. So when we have intervention programs, we have not really looked into this particular aspect.
What kind of a message you have for the youth of this country?
My message is this: anyone who is working with people who use drug, is that there is hope. Hope for those who have got involved into drugs, they can always overcome. The other message that I have for the youth is that you need to learn about life, need to learn more about yourself, your abilities, because drug abuse is again a way of coping with life. So the best way to learn and cope with the life problems is to develop your own skills, abilities, and use it in a very constructive way than to go into drug abuse, which is a very destructive, death-bringing one. So you have this choice to choose to live life without drugs, but you can live that to its fullness without using drugs. So this is something which I would like to conclude.
Thank you very much. It was a good message that there is hope for the youth who are into addiction, and there is hope for the youth, those who have not yet entered into addiction, by learning to live a meaningful life. Thank you very much for this interview with us.
Thank you, Professor.
Welcome to this presentation about capacity building and training of professionals in social work and HIV/AIDS. We have with us Dr. Bernard D'Souza, who is a director of the Cell for AIDS Research and Action Training, which is located in Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. Dr. Brinal, to begin with, can you tell us briefly about the Cell for AIDS Research and Action Training, which is established in the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai?
Actually, when the HIV and AIDS epidemic was becoming visible in Bombay, and you would say also in the country, the need was felt for counseling training, and that's why that is when TISS had begun to respond and collaborated with the Directorate of Health Services to provide counseling training, because social workers were placed in hospitals and began to see people affected by HIV. And since then, in 1993, the Ford Foundation had given us a grant to set up a cell which would basically consolidate the work that was already taking place and also expand. So the objective of the cell is to basically conduct research, training, capacity building, and also undertake advocacy and do innovative interventions in the field of HIV and AIDS. So the cell is now almost 12 years old, and today a lot of our work is also at the international level. We had initially done research work with social workers in Bombay, basically to understand what were their training needs in relation to the HIV/AIDS epidemic, and from that and our other experiences, we began to develop curriculum in the field of HIV and AIDS. And TISS was also the apex center. I mean, the cell was the apex center for counseling training in the country as part of the National AIDS Control Program. Today we are doing a lot of training. We have a 10-week program actually on HIV/AIDS counseling and psychosocial interventions, which basically caters to professionals working in the field of HIV and AIDS, sexuality and reproductive health in India, and also we've been getting requests from Africa, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and so a significant proportion of the participants are also from these countries. Currently we are doing capacity building for all AWARD sponsored projects who are working on targeted interventions, care and support in the country. Most of their staff are social workers working in the field of HIV and AIDS in Maharashtra on different projects. So that is a USAID funded project, and we're also going to be collaborating with the UNDP, basically to build capacities of NGOs who are working on gender issues and development issues in Haryana, Uttar Pradesh and Punjab on HIV and AIDS.
Dr. Brinal, you spoke about various activities of this particular cell. In that you mentioned about research. Can you highlight about some details about the kind of research that you are doing in the area of HIV/AIDS training and prevention programs, the type of training that you are doing, and the kind of action that is taken as a result of this research work that your center is undertaking?
As an institute and as CARET, a number of research studies have taken place in the field, have been undertaken in the field of HIV and AIDS. One, there have been many situational assessments to understand risk, to understand governmental response, NGO responses to the epidemic. Then currently there is a study going on by two colleagues which is looking at child-headed households, because that is becoming a major reality in our country, especially in high prevalence states. There are many research studies, two other studies which are also well known are on stigma and discrimination, and community and household responses, which another senior faculty member at TISS has undertaken. Then myself, I am personally engaged in a study on understanding sexual negotiation among serodiscordant HIV couples, and how does HIV impact their lives and their choices, and how are they able to negotiate safer sex behavior. So these have been some of the studies, and the purpose of these studies is, one is to inform interventions, to advocate for the groups that we are doing research on and with, and also to carry it into our curriculum, because a lot of this work does get integrated into our teaching, into our field work, into our the kind of extension work that we do in the field of HIV and AIDS. So it's not research for research sake only, but to definitely to feed interventions, to feed policy, to advocate for the communities that we are working with.
Dr. Brunel, it is nice to hear about the various type of